What about turning of genre experts? This idea of genre experts and generic gatekeepers, and the issue of genre teaching as well. Do you think it is possible to teach genre, and the extent to which this actually is considered controversial in relation to writing and creativity? Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Shall I start?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay. Thank you. I will let the answer of Dr. Mishri's question to Professor Jeti. But I'd like to react on your comment on standardization and creativity. And this is one of the other issues that we need to tackle in an academic writing course, whether we teach our students the ropes, the conventions, in order to be accepted into the community by the gatekeepers, or we ask them or we encourage them to be creative, and this is a big dilemma. This is a big dilemma I encounter, and I think any teacher of academic writing course would encounter in order not to lead our students into error. If we ask them to be creative, to transgress the boundaries or the conventions of the genre, and then they can be penalized by other gatekeepers. And so we socialize them. So, I mean, the academic writing course is all the time. I think we should do that, but you're free to do it. I mean, I do not bear any responsibility for any penalization you may get from my colleagues. I told you it's not only about communities, but also about individual preferences. And an example here at stake is the use of art in academic writing. Some people would encourage use I, some other colleagues would encourage the impersonal or the passive, or sometimes the researcher. So we try to give them a picture, but then just let them choose. About creativity, it's more affordable to expert writers than to novices. Now, novice students or novice researchers would better keep the conventions. Once they become established, they can be creative. And this is an important concept we teach about academic writing, positioning yourself. Okay? Position yourself. Do not forget about your limits. Okay? I'm a researcher, I'm a postgraduate researcher. I cannot afford the luxuries of an expert writer. Okay? So position yourself, know your position, and act accordingly in your writing. Now, about the teaching of genre, explicit teaching, last week we just defended an MA dissertation, a student of mine implementing a genre-based pedagogy in writing at the level of high school. And she obtained very good results about how this helps students or pupils become better writers, more proficient writers. So why not implement it? I think it's a good thing, and I started using it in my courses. So what I'm going to work on is to try to make it more theory-based, so that to try to standardize it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Tweety. Professor Salami, now the floor is yours. Professor Tweety, to answer the question of
Thank you. The gist of my argument is the idea that this course always involves a public performance. It is a dramaturgical model based on theatricality. In other words, when we talk about observance of rituals or subversion of rituals, in both cases I take them to be token, ostensive, token observance or token subversion. And this is particularly true of literature. Literature as a highly opaque type of discourse, where the gap between the three poles of what is intended, what is presented in the text, and how it is interpreted is, a big one. And there is no guarantee that there is a systematic link between the three dimensions. Intention and the problem of the intentional fallacy is one thing. What the text says is another thing, and how it is interpreted is yet another thing. I'll give you a number of angles that could help. For example, what you have talked about may be relevant to the notion of orality versus literacy. And I dealt with this in Tricky and Atari 2000. You could also talk about it in terms of code switching, the pragmatics of code switching. And I dealt with this in Tricky and Smelly 2018, or the manipulation of narratorial techniques. Here again, it's Tricky 1991 or Tricky and Tricky 2018. This is the gist of my answer.
Thank you very much, Professor Tweedy. Professor Babaya, do you have something to add concerning
Very simple. Concerning your question, male and female. Well, is there a difference? As far as the transcultural female writers, I think that plenty. I've looked at I looked at the program. There are plenty of lectures that are going to be directly linked to the transcultural writers. Safiya Sahli, I think in a moment we'll talk about hybridity in Jamaica Kincaid and but concerning the female writers, there are other female writers. Of course, Essa Jabbar, I don't know whether you are familiar with her. Essa Jabbar, Hélène Sixou, and plenty of others that have dealt with the idea of language, the question of language, with their relation to language, not to identity itself. Essa Jabbar doesn't only speak about language of the colonizer, the French. The French does also speak about the Berber, about the language of the women, about the body as language itself, and of course the silence itself as the language of women in our own country. So you have certainly plenty of things to learn in that. I've just read a book, I think it's one of the last books by Lucy Rigaray. You must have heard it. In the beginning was a woman, in which she deals of the origin of the notion of the subjectivity and linked it back to the symposium, to the Plato symposium, in which who has the poet, I think, what's his name? The poet in the symposium? No, the poet in the symposium. There is a poet. China. The one, the people, those who were attending the symposium and drinking at the same time. There was Socrates. There was who else? Le poète du banquet. Le banquet de Platon, le poète. Ah, exact quelque chose. He brought this myth, the myth of the origin of the world, and he did address himself to how the world was constructed in the beginning. In the beginning, the people human beings were spherical in shape, having four arms, 4 eyes, 4 ears, and they were so important and potent, they were so powerful that the gods were afraid of them, started being afraid. So the gods started discussing, and it was Zeus who found the solution by cutting them into 2. And since then, human beings are halves. This is why we speak about the best half. Ma meilleure moitié, etc. Since then, human beings, so that was the cutting of the human beings who were spherical, and you know the shape of the sphere, the circle is perfection. The full circle, the circle, the round, it has the quality of perfection. So by dividing them, it imperfected them, and hence they spent their whole lives seeking one another, and whenever they meet, they embrace, just to turn to become whole. So you see that. So in the beginning, there were no sexes. The sexes were created afterwards. They were male and female at the same time. And in the symposium, it was the notion of hermaphrodite and hydrogyny is much qualified, appreciated than heterosexuality. So it was the cutting that created that imperfection in humanity. I don't know whether you see what did you get? Have I answered the question?
Thank you very much, Professor Mabaya. Thank you, Professor Fiki, Professor Salami as well. Now we have the letter of gratitude ceremony. before the break that we're going to have, the coffee break. Thank you.